Hello, folks. My name is Joe Wheaton from Utah State University, and we're going to take you on a virtual field tour up Spawn Creek. This is a field tour that I've probably taken over 500 people on in person in various workshops and school field trips. And it's a short, about 35, 40-minute drive up Logan Canyon from Utah State University. And with COVID, we're unable to do the in-person workshops, and so the field tour, really, there's no good substitute for it. But what I'm going to attempt to do here in this rather long-winded video is try and reproduce what we do when we are out in the field together. And so you're going to see a bunch of jerky GoPro footage that walks you up and points out all the same stops, the same things we do together when we're on the field trip. And the purpose of this is to learn to read riverscapes and primarily identify valley bottoms and recognize structural forcing. And the reason for this, coming back to our principles of what constitutes healthy riverscapes, is first off, streams need space. How much space they need is defined by their valley bottom. So if you can map or identify what that valley bottom is, then you're in really good shape. And it's one thing to show up to a valley bottom that has active beaver dams or woody accumulations in it, and you see the extent of area that it's accessing. But it can be another thing to come to a riverscape where maybe some of that activity, that structural forcing, has been absent for a little bit. And what we tend to see is people commonly undersell what's possible. And so just to remind you, the valley bottom is the area that could plausibly flood in the contemporary natural flow regime. And so in this case, that includes the active channels in blue and the active floodplain in green. What's not included in it are terraces, basically former abandoned channels and floodplains, abandoned from a bygone era, a completely different flow regime. So we're interested in these areas that could plausibly flood, and that means if there was structural forcing, for example, from beaver dams. It doesn't include those terraces. And for the valley bottom of interest, you're going to want to think, whose valley bottom is it? So in this picture, flowing from left to right, we have a valley bottom of this main stem, but then we also have these valley bottoms from tributaries coming in. And those fans are not part of the main stem's valley bottom. They are the terminus. They are part of the valley bottom of the tributaries, okay? So those are the kind of areas we want to identify while we're in the field. And you can see the difference here. So here I'm looking down at a valley bottom with some structural forcing by beaver dams. And you can see the difference in areas where hill slopes might confine lateral movement versus terraces, which could be laterally eroded, versus a fan. And the fan, depending on how active it is, may be pinching up the valley. So those are these cross sections here and here. Okay. The other reason that we want to do this is that structure forces complexity. This virtual field trip is going to really highlight beaver dam activity in Spawn Creek, and that beaver dam activity makes for really complex hydraulics and more interesting sort of geomorphic responses in terms of amplifying locally erosion, deposition, and leaving in its wake much more heterogeneous habitat. And it just so happens that doing that also builds resiliency. So we're not going to focus much on resiliency here, but really just structural forcing. And that is, I have either a wood accumulation or a beaver dam, and those cause changes to hydraulics. A structural element is something that obstructs or alters what would otherwise be free-flowing path of water. So it changes the hydraulics. In the case of a dam, backs water up, slows it down, makes it deeper, and then over the dam, speeds it up. And so these things can amplify geomorphic processes of erosion and deposition locally, which leads to more diverse geomorphic units, which leads to more complex habitat. So that's the purpose. That's why we are going to take this little virtual tour. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out making some observations down here on this fan of Spawn Creek as it enters into the Temple Fork main stem. Temple Fork then goes down, drains into the Logan River, and we'll take a wander on up, and there's a whole bunch of little video segments. It's like on the order of, I don't know, 30 or 40 stops as we make our way up. We'll actually head up this little unnamed tributary here, and then we'll come across the uplands well outside the valley bottom, and then we'll dip down in to some big complexes up there on Spawn Creek. So that's where we're going, and we'll start out. You'll see us driving right out of Logan and up the canyon. Hope you enjoy it.